Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and this episode 549. I'm joined as always by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPen89 on Twitter. Stacy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I cannot complain. Yesterday was a good day. Good day for the Knicks. Good day for my football team. A good day for anybody who hates the Kansas City Chiefs. Dare I say? We're going to talk about the Knicks, not about football. Although you have a game tonight, so I have a feeling the Eagles will make you happy tonight.
Last time they played hardball, they lost. So that was Chip Kelly against the Niners, but we'll see. I don't have any good feelings right now. So. But I do feel good about the Knicks. So
yeah, there we go. That's what's really important. We're going to talk about our good feelings about the Knicks. Before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. First, Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may watch this podcast. If you are and not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be huge help to us. Strickland also has merchandise which you can find on our website at www.strict.land. There's a link to take it to our merchandise store with all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles. You name it, we got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Circle and this podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes My Videos Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. The further tiers is a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll the Pod, where you get access to Strickland Roll the Pod that I host with YC, where we rant and rave about the Knicks team more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles written by our staff, and you get access to Strickland NFL, which you guessed it, podcast by the NFL that's hosted by Constantine Metricos and Desmond Novak. There for the tiers, $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier that's come with a variety of additional benefits like listening on our pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you, and none of this would be possible without our sponsor, FanDuel. FanDuel has you covered for all your betting needs. If you want to place a bet on Monday Night Football, they got you. Okay. The Knicks, they had a week. They went 3-1 over these 4 games. They lost to Boston, took care of business against Charlotte, took care of business against Utah, and won a chippy, but I think ultimately a game that they were relatively comfortable in from beginning to end. Or against Orlando yesterday, 106-100. It was a matinee game, tipped off at noon. It was a weird game. I thought, we spend a lot of time talking about like various different the different tactical approaches of Mike Brown in comparison to Tom Thibodeau, and how has the scheme changed offensively? What are they doing defensively that is different? And it's not to say that none of those things were factors in the victory yesterday, but I just thought the Knicks. It was like a very vibes-based game. Like, I did not feel like either team was operating on some type of X's and O's level that was confounding their opponent. I didn't think that there was, they're really challenging the Knicks because they're doing X, so the Knicks responded with Y. Like, I didn't think there was a lot of that. It just felt very much like a, kind of like a, I don't want to say pickup game is also the wrong word, but it did have a little bit of a feeling of just like, and
less structure.
Not, yeah, like it not to say that it wasn't competitive. It was definitely competitive. There's no question about that. But it didn't feel, it did not feel very structured. And part of that might have been just because of how Orlando started the game in terms of they're just pushing the pace and really not giving you any chance to rest. The Knicks got caught out even after makes early in the first quarter. I know Deuce McBride got hurt. Hopefully he's back in short order here. And he obviously didn't close the game for the Knicks. He was 0 for 5 from 3 yesterday. His shot, I guess he got all his makes out against Utah. But I felt to start the game, the Knicks were really getting cut up by Orlando's dribble penetration. I didn't think they were not keeping them out of the paint. And even if they were, able to kind of cut off a shot at the rim, they were scrambling all over And I just thought Orlando was getting a really, really steady stream of quality looks early in that game. And I thought Deuce came in and you immediately felt the difference of what a quality, high level point of attack defender offers this team and how that makes life easier for Mikal Bridges or an OG Anunoby or a Josh Hart or Mitchell Robinson or, any of these guys. Um, and, I don't want to go like crazy and say Deuce like flip the game or anything like that, but I did think there was a tangible difference in the Knicks' defensive, I wouldn't say effort, but effectiveness. And that sustained from that point on throughout the game. If you want to tell me that, yes, they're still giving up too many wide open threes and they can clean this, yeah, of course. I'm not denying that. They definitely still have a lot to do to clean that up. But as far as kind of walling off the paint more or less, I think they're doing a much better job of that over the last few games, last few weeks, I would say, probably since the last time they played Orlando. I think you can sense that there's been a difference there. It's not perfect, obviously, but it's okay. And I think they're up to 13th now in defensive rating. So, that's kind of more or less the level that I assumed coming into the season might be kind of, I don't want to, yeah, like maybe best case scenario in a lot of ways for them. So yeah, I would say that I thought it was a gutty win. I think it was one that they needed to get almost regardless of how. They just needed to get that win against a team like Orlando, who has given them problems early this season. And sure, like, there was injury stuff on both ends here, right? Where Franz goes out early in the game, Deuce goes out pretty early in the second half. But either way, I think this is an opponent that has not just this year, but at various points over the last couple of years, given them some trouble with their size and their length and how switchable they are. So to get this win and get it comfortably, like I thought, the final score to some extent, I think makes it it flatters Orlando a little bit. I don't really know why it was funny. It was a departure from Tibbs, right? Where Mike Brown was like, "All right, I guess we're up 12 here with a minute 30 left. Let's just get the scrub squad in," and that kind of put the game in this weird limbo late on. That you were like, "What's going on here?" But yeah, I thought the Knicks took care of business. I thought they were comfortable. I thought they were good, and they got a great performance out of Jalen Brunson. I thought he was really, really good in this game, and I thought he picked it up defensively after the first few minutes of the first quarter. I thought just overall, um, that was exactly what you needed from him in a game without Carl Anthony Towns, right? The Knicks did not have Carl Anthony Towns in this game either. So, yeah, overall, really good. And you got, some really encouraging performances, especially, from Aro Hukporti. I thought he was really, really good. And if that's your third big and he can start putting together performances like that more consistently, yeah, you've got to feel better, or not just better, but good about where the Knicks depth is, at least to kind of manage a full regular season anyway.
Yeah, I mean it's the kind of team to the extent you take Detroit seriously, it's the kind of team they need to be able to prove they can beat, right? A physical team, especially at this point of the season. I like to see that Mitch was more active on the offensive glass. I know people are still a little worried about the defense, but this is the kind of team, especially now with their identity shifting more towards offense focused. Um, you know, this is the like relative to talent. I'll say this over and over. Relative to talent, Detroit vastly outperformed compared to the Knicks, right? I mean, on talent, that should have been a sweep. Instead, not only was it 6 games, it went every game down to the wire because of the stylistic differences. Because, particularly in the postseason, you're going to get a looser whistle. And Orlando is another team that just can muck up. And the more they lean into Brown ball, Mike Brown ball, um, you know, that is the kind of thing where if they're doing things like switching, if they can get into passing lanes, that creates more risk, right? It's the path, I think, to beating that kind of style more consistently. But they're gonna have to fight. They're gonna have to, when they're not getting calls, fight through screens, not get it into their own heads. figure out how to win the possession battle when easy shots are not. Um, it's tough to come by high percentage shots. So I think that that's very encouraging in that regard. I think a lot of the guys that you mentioned, Deuce, right? I think he's been on fire from three. Um, he had a long stretch. He was on fire. I think the last game, they came back down to earth. But he's, I mean, he gives you that energy, and it's just a very complementary skill set. IQ is the common comp, but we know that he doesn't do quite the same things as quickly, but it's similar in the sense that as a guy who provides no spacing issues and doesn't need the ball, and is an impactful defender in a different way from quickly, that's what he gives, and that's perfect next to high usage stars like Brunson or Cat. Um, so you're just very encouraged. I think me and you were both really high on Huckborty last year. So I don't know if it was a new system or whatever, but if that light bulb has gone on, he was also hurt. So we have no idea what's going on with a lot of these guys. That's, to your point, a pretty big development, because they're going to need. Mitchell Robinson's health is always a question mark. Even Cat has health question marks, and Cat plays a specific type of way. If you have a traditional big who's like can give you 10, 15 minutes at a high level like that, and do some things that neither of those Cat can do these things, but off the short roll, make a dribble, provide presence on the glass, provide rim protection. It's pretty important.
He had a play where he fed I forgot who it was. It might have been Bridges in the corner. I don't think Bridges hit the shot, but it was like just a really nice short roll pass. And I think we've at least on this podcast we've evolved beyond a world where we describe Mitchell Robinson as a zero skill offensive player. But, Mitch isn't going to do shit like that. He's just not. And that doesn't mean that it makes Huckporty better, but it does give him a little bit of a different variation. It's not exactly the same for a defense, right? To defend Huckporty the same way in that kind of position as they might Mitchell Robinson. So that is all super encouraging. The other thing I really liked to see from him was I thought defensively he did a much better job of walling up when he was by the rim, when he's contesting at the rim. And his speed makes a difference. I think Mike Brown even referenced it after the game. I think he called him like one of the fastest bigs he's ever seen end to end. And I don't actually think that's an exaggeration. Like it really does stand out. And maybe even more so because when we first got a look at him in his first summer league, we were like, is this guy like able to move like an NBA big man? So to see the kind of speed he can move at now is very incredible. And I do wonder if there was some adjustment required for him coming into this season, because he had clearly dropped a lot of weight, and playing at a lower weight, that can be an adjustment. So overall, I just thought it was really, really a nice performance from him. And it's I don't think he's somebody that's going to be in the rotation all the time, right? But in the event where you're like, hey, we have our starting centers out or Mitch is out, the fact that he's at least now, I think, and it's not just this game, in the last couple of performances we've seen from him when he's gotten time, I think you're seeing, okay, like there's still some rough edges here and there's still going to be some ups and downs, but this is a guy who I think, maybe for 15, 20 minutes, if you really need him, he can do that. And that's very encouraging because, whether he could or not last year, he didn't get that opportunity. So, again, like I mentioned this on the pod last week with Prez, but I was anyway, critical of Mike Brown for not kind of using his depth enough early this season in terms of the young guys that they had drafted over the last couple of years. And the fact that he is giving real opportunities to Ariel Huckporty, giving real opportunities to Tyler Kolek, giving real opportunities, although a little bit more limited, to Muhammad Diawara, I think that's kind of part of what was really frustrating about last year and frustrating about Tibbs in general, right? Was just like the unwillingness to give guys a chance when you're shorthanded or just in situations where you maybe need a spark or need somebody to buy minutes. So, yeah, I would say credit to Mike Brown as well, because these guys needed more minutes and we needed them to, yeah, we needed more from them as well.
Yeah, and the team is starting to find its way. I think that the early season is just weird, right? Chicago looked like a contender. Now they're a mess. Cleveland still hasn't completely figured it out. We'll see what happens with Detroit. I think from our conversations, you can tell I'm pretty skeptical still about that. Um, so I think all things considered, right? Like, has the process been perfect? No, but they're 14-7 or 16-7 now. Um, they're on pace for, you know, 50, 57 wins, I think, with this 58 wins.
56, 57 wins, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think you're seeing, I think the biggest development is still Mikal Bridges becoming a real two-way. It's fair to call him a two-way star at this point. And I think a lot of the times people will overuse that to like denigrate a player like Steph Curry or Jokic, who's more one way. But the point is, Bridges is giving them pretty much everything you could have asked for. OG has pretty much come back without a hitch. You can see how important he is. And so they've missed time from Brunson. OG, Mitch has had his issues. Cat has been hurt. They're still winning, and they're starting to have a different process. Those are the things I think that you have to look for. And even Deuce has been in and out of the lineup, right? And when he's played, we don't know what was going on, but he had those things. They lost Shamit, which I still am really bummed about, and I hope that by the playoffs or something they can get him back. But and they have a little bit of flexibility, so we'll see. If they make a trade, obviously there's a big rumored name, but if Chicago blows it up, I think Ayo Dosunmu is someone that you've talked about. So I think it's like, we live game to game, and every game ends up being a referendum, right? Like, I think Brunson played like shit against the Celtics, and I think it was Mensa from Knicks Film School was like, Brunson played like shit tonight. That's okay. Like, that happens, but it's kind of shows a mirror to like every game ends up being a referendum on a player, on a team, like in the discourse. But just sometimes it's good to step back a little bit and say they're not getting lucky on process. The process is evolving, and they can play better. But at the end of the day, they're doing many of the things that we wanted to see, and they're 16-7. So
Yeah, just looking at it. So cleaning the glass, they filter out garbage time. The Knicks are second in offensive rating, 123.7. They are 13th in defensive rating, 114.5. They are by whatever that is by net. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, so this is a team that is looking good, like at least by these kind of catch-all metrics. And I understand some, like we talked about this extensively. Me and President talked about this extensively when we were talking about kind of why trading for Giannis. What does he offer, and so on and so forth. But I think what is true is that at times there is and maybe it's correct. It's arguably correct. We've all talked about it too, where it's like, oh, we could use another creator. We could use another creator. We could use another creator. And, is that a problem for the Knicks? Sure. Yeah, I think it's a fair criticism to lay at their feet, that at times they can get bogged down and rely too much on Jalen Brunson to be an initiator. I think Mike Brown has implemented a lot of things that are easing that burden, but that doesn't mean that when you get into a postseason series against a high-level defensive team that's maybe a little bit more locked in, and in general, is also, yeah, it's just more locked in. Maybe has more capable defenders as well. That won't become an issue. But and I think this is where what you're talking about, where every game becomes a referendum. Just in this example I'm giving, I think at times what we're talking about. We're like, when people are going so upset about losing this game on Tuesday to whoever, or on that Wednesday, and I think the thing is, we're all consciously or subconsciously, we're not really upset, or maybe not we, but I think generally people are not that upset about the idea of the Knicks losing a game every now and then. I mean, that's kind of how it works. But I think it's all because you're just ultimately comparing it to like, okay, well, this sucked. So what does this mean for May? What does this mean for April? What does this mean for June when we're playing in these games that actually really, really matter to us? And that like foreboding thought, right? Of like, oh, this might not matter today because we're playing whoever, like we're playing the Jazz on a Friday night. But it's going to matter when we're playing a best of 7 series against the Detroit Pistons or the Orlando Magic or whoever. And it's hard to kind of just at times live in the moment and just accept things for what they are and not try to project and make it, you know, an overarching main kind of just like an overarching criticism or anything. I think that's kind of the difficulty of when you reach a point um, as a team and as a fan base where you almost feel like, this is like we're our standard is we're trying to win a championship, right? That's the goal. The goal is to win a championship. We're not really measuring success anymore um, against trying to win 50 games, trying to get to the second round of the playoffs. Like those goals have been hit, those targets have been achieved. Now it's okay, can you get to the finals? And if you get to the finals, how do you feel about your chances as constructed to win a championship? And you know, those questions ultimately probably are not going to be answered um until we get there. But that's the thing that is in the back of all of our heads and kind of like the boogeyman that, you know, I think when they do lose a game that's ugly. I mean, look, I'm not even gonna lie. When they won the game against Dallas a couple of what was that, a couple weeks ago, where it was an ugly 2-point win. And that one, I was like, afterwards, I was like, all right, I'm happy they got the win, but Jesus Christ, this team has to get it together. Like they look terrible on the road. They can't make shots. Like what's going on? Um, so I think everybody's guilty of that, but it is, I think, if all the numbers are telling you this is a very good team and the Knicks are now 23 games into the season, so they're a little over a quarter of the way into their season, um, you know, barring any huge injury crisis, there's no reason to think this team is anything short of very, very, very good and definitely capable of winning the conference.
Yeah, and I mean we're not going to know till we know. Um, you know, but in terms of the types of teams, we'll say this, right? They've struggled more than you'd expect with kind of the tough defensive teams, but they haven't lost a series like that since Miami. And I think part of that is they've figured out how to win those kinds of series. They beat the Sixers in kind of a knockdown, drag it out series. Yeah, it was higher scoring, but it's physical, right? They beat Detroit last year. The team that they lost to is not a threat right now. The team that they've lost to the last 2 years. The only team that could come close to that style is Cleveland, but they're floundering. So it really, it's everything that you would want to see. We just have to keep seeing more. And obviously, I think all of what we're talking about is predicated on obviously staying healthy, but also continued improvement. But Brunson, even like we were talking, every time he has a bad game, it's like, oh, this is an early season slump, but he's still playing really well. And if he has that January leap, then you're talking about an MVP caliber season. I expect Cat to get right at some point. This is a career 40% shooter. It just either it's an injury bothering him, or I don't think he forgot how to shoot. I think you'd agree there. And then
I would say it's very unlikely that he forgot how to shoot. Yes.
Yeah. So then Bridges and OG, they're playing as well as you could hope. This is the vision.
By
Now
the way,
the vision might
Cat's up to 35% right now from three.
that's well below his average though, right? So I think we're
It is.
expecting
It
a lot
is.
more. And it's
No,
not
I'm
like his
just, I'm
volume
just,
is that much higher, right? So
yeah. I'm just saying, like, he was at 31% a couple weeks ago, and it's like, oh, what's wrong with this guy? And it's like, look, he's probably going to go on a heater here very soon, and I don't
in
know
early
if this would.
season, every game changes so much, right? With the percentages.
Yeah.
So
Right. So I would just say, yeah, I'm not worried about Karl Anthony Towns shooting. That's like the last thing I'm worried about with Karl Anthony Towns.
yeah, and we know what he is, and to the extent that he has limitations, I think when OG is healthy, you've seen how well they've been able to manage around that. You know, Brown has been willing to experiment with the lineup. That's something I do want to talk about. So, I mean, I think against the Jazz, Hart started and it blew up the plus minus numbers. I don't this Jazz are not a serious team right now, to put it mildly. But do you have more faith in that Hart starting lineup? I still think it should be Deuce. I still think that there are going to be teams, especially a team like Detroit, that'll hide a center on Josh. I think it comes back to, do you believe that that lineup failed because Josh just poses insurmountable constraints, or because Tibbs is not creative enough in exploiting some of the reactions? I'd be curious how you feel about that. And I think the other thing both you and I would agree on is, if it doesn't work, one, it's not going to, that lineup isn't going to play 5,000 minutes a game when it starts. But two, if it doesn't work, Brown has shown the ability to adapt, right? You wanted him to not just start Mitch, and I think we've seen he's adapted away from starting Mitch, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, he has shown that adaptability. I disagree with starting Josh Hart. I think it's the wrong move. I think that Deuce McBride is very clearly a better option in that lineup. And I think, given the Knicks' kind of limited options on the wing, it doesn't make sense to start all three. That being said, for all the reasons that you've mentioned, I think it's more of like I disagree with it, but I'm not going to sit here and kill the Knicks or kill Mike Brown for going with that, because I don't think that he'll stick with that lineup if it doesn't work over, whatever, the next couple of weeks. I don't think that, like you also mentioned, he's not going to play at 7,000 minutes and never try anything else. So those things give you more confidence in, like, okay, well, if I'm right, and I could be wrong, but if I'm right, and the lineup with Deuce is much better than the lineup with Josh Hart, I think we can have some cautious optimism that Mike Brown will eventually reach that conclusion, or at least would adjust to that being the conclusion. And we can go from there. And the other thing is, like, when he says, like, Tibbs used to say, this guy is situational, right? Oh, yeah, I like this guy, but he's situational right now. He's just got to stay ready. His chance will come. And you kind of felt like, okay, but this chance is probably actually never going to come, right? That's what you mean by that. Whereas with Mike Brown, like, we've seen him already, like, where it felt like, oh, Huckporty's going to play a lot. And then Huckporty's not even in the rotation. And then all of a sudden, Huckporty's getting opportunities again. And I think when you see that, same with Tyler Kolek, right? Kolek was in the rotation to start the year, then he was out, and now he's pretty consistently playing. And yeah, sure, some of that's influenced by injury, but that doesn't take away from that, because we saw with Tibbs, like, his adjustment oftentimes would just be to ramp up minutes for everybody else in lieu of injury, not to give anybody a chance. So I would say that, like, that starting lineup is not the one I would have picked. I do think that it's fine that Mike Brown went with it. I really, I say this, like, I feel like I say this every pod. At some point, we're gonna have to stop talking about Tibbs and comparing everything to Tibbs. But, like, I think you could argue that if there was an indictment of Tibbs, or if not that there was only one, but if you had an indictment of Tibbs, one of them could have been like, hey, I get that Josh Hart in this lineup, and maybe the spacing isn't perfect, and blah blah blah. But, like, that lineup was fucking bad for the last half of the season. Like, that doesn't make sense. That lineup should at least be good. Now, it might not be your best lineup, but it should be a good lineup. It's 5 good NBA players, and you have a stretch 5, and you have an all NBA point guard, and you have 2. It's like, there's no reason that lineup should have been flat out bad the way it was by the time we got to the playoffs. And I think if you feel that way, which I feel like most people should, then it's not an unreasonable thing for Mike Brown to at least give it a chance and make that kind of the option that he's going to go with for right now. As long as he remains open to new evidence, I don't see the issue with that.
Yeah, not something to panic about. And we'll see. And if he's able to be a little bit more creative with Josh, if Josh is also just playing with a little more focus, I think that's been kind of one of the things that we've all talked about, right? Is last year and even the year before, the year before, the Josh Hart saga on the Knicks has been interesting, right? They trade for him. That was the year they faced Miami, right? Yeah, they traded him for him the year they faced Miami, end up on a 53-win pace. Upset Cleveland in the first round. He's a big part of it, of the turnaround. The next season, he ends up playing a ton of minutes. He's finally starting. They have a ton of injuries, right? And I think some of the lapses on defense we understood, right? He ended up having an abdominal injury against Indiana. Like, I think for you and me, last year and the year before, it was he's a space cadet, but the mental and physical load is just pretty insane for him. So that's going to happen. And I think we continued to see those, and in some games we continued to see it not get held accountable. But I don't know if that's happened behind closed doors. There does seem to be more consistent focus. Are you still concerned? I think like a week or two ago, I think you and I had been more concerned about not just it's we know it's not the shooting, right? It's, is he going to bring it every day on defense? Is he going to do his job? Is he going to, like, those kind of things? I think is what we'd raised. Have those concerns been alleviated somewhat for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like, he's playing with just a much better focus so far, or not so far, I should say, in these last, like you mentioned, since we had that conversation, these last few weeks, I would say the last 2 or 3 weeks, really, again, since that Orlando game, I just think a lot of guys, I don't know, maybe it was a wake up call for them, but it's just been a much better focused, cohesive team effort. I thought even in the Boston game where Brunson was terrible, I don't think Josh Hart was amazing or anything, but I I thought he was good. He was good in that game. Like, he was good. I thought his defense was fine. And, look, you're always going to have some issues with him defensively because he's not necessarily the most locked in guy in terms of staying disciplined. I think he can kind of have his feet caught in cement sometimes, when he's defending in space. There are moments where you're like, he just kind of gets blown by and he can't move laterally as well as you would obviously love for him to be able to do. But the stuff that is actually killer is when you're like, hey, Josh, can you fucking just like do the game plan? Can you like pay attention to your task? Can you stay on task? And that was stuff that last year was constantly a problem. And it wasn't just last year. I mean, we saw it early in this season that there were times where you were like, hey, Josh, like, can we get our shit together here, please? And he had moments where he was terrible. Like that. I mean, that game against Chicago where he was, I don't know, it felt like he was having a temper tantrum was awful. But these last few weeks have been really good. And that's ultimately what you need from him. And to the extent that I don't think it's a problem anymore, I wouldn't say it's not a problem anymore, but it's now at the level of a problem where it's like, this is just acceptable. This is like, oh, these are his flaws as a player, right? This is not, he's playing beneath his level. And that's what I felt about a lot of what he was doing last year, was he was playing beneath his level. And that is not happening right now. I think whatever his flaws are defensively, we knew that he should be able to do better than he was doing at points last year.
Yeah, and there's
right now,
things. Yeah, good, sorry.
Yeah, all I was going to say is right now, that's not the problem. Like, he is giving you what he has on defense. He is playing relatively disciplined. He is obviously playing hard. I think his rebounding has notched back up to where you always expect it almost from him, which is crazy to say because he's a 6'4" guard wing hybrid thing. Who the hell knows? But yeah, I mean, I would say that between the increased focus on defense and then simply just the willingness to shoot the ball is making a big difference. Like I thought he went 1 of 5 or whatever the hell it was against Charlotte from 3, and I actually was super encouraged by that because I was like, what you don't like, shooting only works if you shoot even when you're not hitting shots, which sounds kind of stupid to say, actually, when I'm saying it out loud. But you get what I mean, right? It's like if you stop shooting the moment you miss a couple of shots, that's when teams can just start completely ignoring you. That's what's a really big killer. And that wasn't the case in that game, even though he wasn't making shots. And it wasn't just that game. He had been on a little bit of a cold streak from 3 after getting really hot. So if he just keeps shooting in those moments, um, that's a really good sign for the Knicks, and it's a good sign for Josh Hart.
Yeah, can't disagree with any of that. And yeah, I think like it's you have to be shooting. If he shoots even 34, 35, like that's not league average anymore. But from an efficiency standpoint, if that's how a lot of possessions end, you're getting a point 1.02, especially in the half court, one point per possession if he's at 33%. You live with that, right? It's still probably better than a mid range shot for most players, like especially late shot clock. Or even if it's something that deep teams aren't just like we're happy to give it up. That's something that um, it's obviously an acceptable outcome. And yeah, I mean, on the defense, what I was going to say is he just he has some limitations, right? We know he's not like he's capable at the point of attack, but he's not an elite point of attack defender on quick guards, right? He doesn't have like insane lateral quickness. He's able to guard up, but his wings, if it's like a 6'9" power forward, if it's Siakam, right? There's just physical limitations there. He battles, but it's the focus.
I mean, he
It's being
defended
locked in.
Giannis. He defended Giannis.
Yeah, so he punches above his weight in those things, but there are obviously some limitations on those things, right? So, what we really just need, right, is especially when Bridges and OG are playing at such a high level, just do your job, and teams are going to be in a bind on the perimeter. And if he's doing that, and he's shooting the ball willingly, and he's not in some cold stretch, you can definitely live with it. I do also just like seeing Deuce that lineup, so I hope we'll also see that. But in general, not a whole lot to be too upset about there.
Yeah, he's this is like this is ultimately what you really wanted from Josh Hart, because we know, like, as long as he's not doing bozo stuff, like, again, just the not paying attention, not staying to task on defense, those are things that are truly can kill you. And the rest of it you work around, right? The rest of it are just like, oh, this is literally just what your flaws are as a player. Oh, your lateral quickness is not X. You have a size limitation, whatever. You can deal with that because that's not killing your entire team kind of construct defensively, which I think he was doing actually at various points this year, where his like inability to just stay disciplined, and last year for sure was a complete killer to what all 5 guys on the floor are even trying to do. And um that's why we've gone as far as being like, hey, maybe Shamit's ahead of him in the mix, and maybe Shamit's just quite frankly a better player right now than him, because Shamit, or whatever his flaws are in terms of um, you know his issues than Josh Hart, right? But he's very disciplined. He competes hard, whatever. But the discipline was the big thing, and you know now that Josh is back to playing like a normal, locked in professional on that end of the floor, you know, you can see like, okay, no, this is the guy. This is the guy that like you fall in love with as a fan, that you traded for, right? This is the exact player it was. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is what he's supposed to look like. And when he's locked in like this, yeah, he's. I'll say it. I'll always say it. There's something he adds that is like, it's not the same. It's not. It goes beyond the numbers. It goes beyond the X's and O stuff. I think that he plays with a kind of bravado and an arrogance. Not even arrogance is probably the wrong word because he's not that type of guy. But there's a bravado to it, and there's like a kind of, you know, puff your chest out kind of attribute to what how he plays. And I think how it can kind of it infuses into the team. I think he like can breathe life into a team at times and change the tempo of a game and change the energy and kind of feeling around a game. And I don't think that that's the case for basically anybody on the team other than him. Just that very kind of specific type of thing. Not saying he's the best player or even the most impactful, but I do think there are things he does that like when he's going good in a game, like when he's at his best level, I think he changes the ceiling of the team completely. Because as much as I love Deuce, um, he can't operate in chaos the way that Josh Hart can, and that's a gift and a curse, right? There is a chaos element to Josh Hart, which is why he's simultaneously a beloved Nick and also an infuriating Nick at times. Um, but within that chaos, when he like finds the right balance and he's going good, yeah, he can be great. He can be great.
Yeah. So I mean, again, it's just there's very little to be discouraged about. I understand. I think for most people, if you had to pick something, I don't even think it's Cat. I think for the reasons both of us mentioned, like there's nothing like any concern I would have about Cat is something I already knew, right? I think Mitchell Robinson is the only real thing. Oh, Mitchell Robinson and Yabu, but Yabu Sele, I think we looked at it as a nice ad. I don't think anyone looked at it as a make or break addition. It hasn't panned out the way, or he hasn't panned out the way you would hope. It could be, by the trade deadline, if it's not happening, you sell low, or maybe you find another person who could use a change of scenery. Are you officially concerned about Mitchell Robinson?
I will say the start of the game yesterday, I thought he was terrible. I don't know what the hell was going on with him there. It looked a lot like what we have seen too often this year. And then again, look, I mentioned a lot of Deuce McBride and how he changed the game. You got to say, man, I thought Ariel Huckporty gave us really, really good minutes, and he gave us a spark in that game that was big, and maybe that lit a fire under Mitch too, because before that he was just kind of like letting guys. It was too easy. I thought too easy for guys to get to the rim. I didn't think his contests were very effective, and yeah, that was all kind of a problem. But I thought he looked really good after that. He closed the game, or he played really well when he came back into the first half. I thought he was sharp in the second half. His offensive rebounding continues to be tremendously effective. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely concerned to the level of like I think this is something we need to monitor. Like, can he can he build off this magic game? Can he now string together 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 couple of weeks of consistent, solid play at the level that we expect from him, or is it going to be a roller coaster? Because it has been too often this year, and the defensive impact has not been what you come to expect from him, which is disappointing just because of the way he finished last year, right? I mean, he was, and maybe even the way he started this year. The way he started this year, you could argue, is some of the best ball that he's played in his career, and then the way he ended last year. Obviously, we know how impactful he was in the postseason. So, um, you know, it, he doesn't need to hit those heights right now, but we definitely need to get more than what we have so far this season. So I don't know if I would say I'm concerned, but I'm not unconcerned. I'm definitely not unconcerned.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the longer term concern would be if you think it's more physical than just he hasn't been locked in or something. Because we know
Well,
he'll bring
I
it.
don't know.
He's a playoff veteran, right? But if you think there's some real chronic physical lack of explosiveness. I think that's what I was talking about with Prez, where Prez is like, no, he just isn't jumping and stuff. And, that I think would be, if you think that's something that's not going away.
I don't know if it's not going away, but it's, I mean, you want to see him jump. Like, that's the thing. It's like, it's not, and we don't know what happened prior to the start of the season, right? He was playing in preseason. He looked great in preseason early. And then all of a sudden he's not playing games, and it's injury management, and he's sitting, he's not, practicing, whatever it is, right? So he's dealing with this, then he comes back. So I don't know. Is this like him kind of, this was his preseason and now he's fine now? Are we going to start seeing more from him? And that, I don't know. Like, we have to see, like, but there's a possibility that the reason he wasn't jumping, the reason he hasn't been as effective defending the rim, is just more like, this is him getting his shit together, right? And we'll have to see. Like, I don't really know what else to say with Mitch, because every time I've doubted the guy in the past and he comes back and he figures it out, I would love if he would shoot better than 17.6% from the free throw line. That's one thing I feel like I can say with some confidence. One thing, in terms of his explosiveness or athleticism, he's been scoring a little bit more, been a little bit more active finishing around the hoop. I think that's a good sign for how he's feeling physically. But yeah, he just needs to dial it up on defense, because I just think the level that he's been at, especially for him, a guy that we know is capable of so much more. Yeah, it's just not been good enough for how good we know he can be.
Yeah, and that's why you would think, and I think we've kind of been waiting for the other shoe to drop for a long time. Because I feel like every time we've said we got to move on, he's not healthy. Last year there was no guarantee that he would come back as strong as he did. The year before, right, he comes back against the Sixers. Basically, he outplays. He was better than Hartenstein, right? In the playoffs, right? In the regular season, you can argue Hartenstein does so many more things, but Hartenstein could not defend Embiid, or Mitch didn't get the guard Turner or Siakam, but you could see the difference, right? And Cleveland too, right? So I do feel like every time we've said he looks diminished, if he's constantly injured, he's also constantly working back from stuff. And I think, I do think that especially if Hart starts to be viable, it might be worth it to shut it down for a month or two, right? Because our goal is not for Mitchell Robinson to play 60.
I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can't shut him down for a month. If he's not hurt, you can't just shut him down for a month.
I mean, if it's diminishing,
he's playing for a contract. There's no way he's going to be cool with that. You just can't do it.
Well, I mean, then you have to figure out what's going on, right? But if this is just who he is, it's not going to help his contract. But I think the goal has to be, he has to be healthy in April, right? Like,
no, of course, but there's a difference between, like, we have to manage him to be healthy in April versus shut him down because Hart looks good and we want him to be healthy in April.
You wouldn't say, the way he's played the last few weeks, I don't think you would say that's acceptable in April too.
Either, yeah, but there's but that's going too far. Like, do I think it's acceptable? Like, no, in the sense of, I know Mitchell Robinson can be much better than he's been, but I don't watch him and look at him and I'm like, this is not like watching some disgraceful player who is, barely, he's not even viable on an NBA floor or something like that. That's what I would describe as, kind of unacceptable or whatever. But what he's playing at right now is just disappointing. That's different. Being disappointing is that happens over the course. I thought fucking Brunson was disappointing against Boston. You know what I mean? But you're like, okay, but he's probably not going to be disappointing consistently like that. Hopefully not, because God, that would be terrible. So I don't know. I just don't. I don't think you can do the shut it down thing. But I take your point. And what I would say is, you can, if Hart is playing like this and he's playing well, you can you can use Huckporty to manage his minutes in game even, right? Like, does Mitch, okay, maybe Mitch only needs to play 12, 13, 14 minutes right now because Huckporty's playing well. That's possible. That's possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible. And also like, hey, competition is good, right? If you're making it clear, like, hey, look, like we still have a ton of respect for you, but Huckporty's playing well. He's earned these minutes, and we're not just going to sit him on the bench just because of what you've done in the past. It's got to be consistently earned here.
Yeah, that's without question. But I do think like if you don't get the kind of Mitchell Robinson we had last year, it becomes tougher. Even Detroit becomes a more worrisome series. Cleveland becomes a more worrisome series. He was obviously integral to beating both of those teams. And then, I don't think I don't really think it. I don't see a path to victory without the Mitch we know he can be against Oklahoma City, if it even comes to that. For that matter, Denver, right? I know we've had success against them the last couple of years, but he's a big part of that. So
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so obviously the Knicks go on these series of wins. It's been great. We just talked about a lot of that. You mentioned earlier that you are not as high on Detroit as many others seem to be. Um, I think Knicks fans, for the most part, are not scared of Detroit, but I think I would say you're in the minority of where you view them on the grand scale of the NBA. What is there a reason why you're like this low on this team and you don't kind of respect them at all?
it's not that I don't respect them. I think they are the quality of team.
Come on, you don't
Relative,
respect them.
do I think they're the best team in the East? No. Do I think they're the second best team in the East? I'm still reasonably high on Cleveland. I think they have a strong case for third. They've done their player development. You have to give them a ton of credit. They got Jenkins out of nowhere, right? I think you and I both thought that losing Schroeder, losing Beasley, losing Tim Hardaway Jr. would have a much bigger impact. Do I still trust their all-around shooting enough to beat a team like the Knicks in a playoff series? No. Do I trust Cade as that guy yet? No. He's at 56 true shooting. I think the Brunson conversations are absolutely ridiculous. I do think Duran has evolved, and I'll give him credit for that. I'll take back what I said earlier in the season that I don't think he would start on the Knicks. I do actually think he would start over Hart. He would start over Mitch, especially if Mitch is having these struggles and can't rely on him playing more than 20 minutes. That becomes a thing. But the rest of their rotation, Osar is a good defensive specialist. You can pretty much ignore him at the 3-point line. The Knicks figured out a way to beat them in 6 games with basically Brunson save us as the offensive strategy, or Cat save us, right? I don't want to take away from Cat. He hit some big shots. But we weren't getting them anything that they weren't creating for themselves, really. OG and Mikal has improved a ton. But without talking about us, yeah, they're a tough defensive team that gives you a high floor. They play hard every night. They're young and they have the energy to expend that, right? There's some upside there for sure. But beyond those 2 guys, and then Osar for his defense, like I'm not worried about Ron Holland. I'm not worried about we'll see what happens as Ivy continues to grow, but that's not a huge concern for me. Dennis Jenkins is good. I haven't seen that motherfucker play in the playoffs yet. I'm very unconcerned. They scream Tibbs team. That's what I said last year, right? I thought last year was very much like year 1 of Tibbs, right? Where Cunningham had the kind of leap that Randall did. I think he was better than Randall was, certainly in 2020 or 2019, the year before. So I'm not saying Cade was at that low level, but the jump to like, no, this is an actual primary guy with some shortcomings in the playoffs, some inefficiency issues. He made that kind of leap. And he was surrounded by great defense and really good spacing. and that gave them a very high floor, like the Knicks in 2020, 21. The year after they came back to earth, it doesn't look like Detroit's going to do that. But even to that Miami series, the Knicks were a team that played hard every night. They had a pretty ball dominant creator and physical bigs, and that gave them a high floor. That made them a pain in the ass to play against. But I don't think that year with Miami, like because they took out the Bucks, it was a little bit more wide open. But I don't think we thought of that team as like a championship expectation team. And that's kind of how I see Detroit. I think they're a good team. They play tough defense, and they have a guy who can get you some buckets. And Duran can be a force in the glass, and he's really expanded his game. I mean, I think the ball handling, and how he's made it functional is what's really interesting to me. Like I could see a version of, like, even now he might be better than Bam on offense, but there is a pretty high ceiling on offense there, and the defense has come along as well as you could have expected. But I still think the Knicks are going to be able to score on them, especially with more intricacy and ball movement on offense. I think we have the advantage on the wings, and I like the matchup quite a bit for the Knicks, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, I like the matchup for the Knicks. I don't think that Detroit is obviously unbeatable or anything like that. I also think that they have a lot of interesting things going for them, in the sense of they have the flexibility to make.
That's a good point.
Big move.
They're probably not finished if they don't want to be. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they have the ability to make moves, and yes, the Knicks could technically make some moves, but the Knicks are operating much more on the margin here than a team like Detroit, who has all their picks, who has a cavalcade of young players available on their roster. Whatever you think about these various players, they're the type that kind of can at least be intriguing in a consolidation type trade. I think that's all really, really encouraging for them. And I do take your point. I think you're right that they only have one guy that can really create, and nobody else is truly a threat.
And he's not the kind of creator yet where he's 56 true shooting. Sorry, you got to show me more than that at this point.
Yeah. He's not been close to the highest levels of offensive engines in the league. He's just not there yet. Duran's made a really big leap. You asked me before the season would I rather have Jalen Duran or Mitchell Robinson. At the time, I said Mitchell Robinson. If Mitchell Robinson doesn't get back to the level that we expect from him pretty soon, that will have aged very poorly. I'll say that much. I think Duran's been really, really good, and defensively, there's still plenty for him to clean up. But offensively, he's taken a really significant leap. There's no way around it. He's a real bona fide offensive threat at the center position, even though he's not, a cat type where he can stretch the floor out beyond the 3-point line. So they've got that. My main, if I were a Pistons fan, my main concern would be at times it feels like they have too many guys that JB Bickerstaff feels like he needs to find minutes for, and whose expense does it come at? There's a lot going on there. I actually like a consolidation trade for that reason alone might be very impactful for them. Just the idea
Another
of like,
echo
okay,
of the early Tibbs Knicks teams, I would say.
Right. I mean, one of the main reasons.
Before, right?
Yeah, one of the main reasons why the team took off after they traded for OG Anunoby, on top of OG Anunoby being really fucking good and impactful himself, is that they moved on from RJ Barrett, who, look, he's playing much better for Toronto, but was not good in New York, quite frankly. Was a destructive player in many ways in New York. And that kind of dual payoff, right, of like, you got rid of the guy who was giving us the worst minutes on the team, and we replace him with awesome player. That can have a massive impact. And so I wonder for Detroit, like, if you get rid of fucking some of these Ron Holland minutes, whatever, you can go on and on. But like, if you can turn that into I don't want to say Larry Markkinen because I thought he was embarrassing when we played them on Friday, though that entire team was embarrassing on Friday. But like, yeah, maybe like a Markkinen or
if Phoenix
whatever.
starts to not play as well, Dylan Brooks fits very well there, right?
Yeah, something. Just anyway, like a good NBA player. If you replace him, it can make a big impact. And I think they're good enough as is that's not insignificant. I mean, right now they have per clean glass, they have a +7 net rating. So that's for comparison's sake. The Knicks have a +8.8 net rating. Sorry, +9.2 net rating. So like the Knicks are, at least based on the games that have been played so far this season, they're a step above. But Detroit is good. They're legit good. And if they can add another piece that can tick you up a little bit, I think that makes them very interesting. I would say that more so than maybe any team in the league, they are an obvious candidate for an in-season consolidation trade of sorts. Just given the draft capital they have, given the fact that Jalen Duren's probably going to be on a substantial contract starting next season, um, like this is the time for them to strike, really. And
Well,
when you
so
have all your picks and stuff too, that makes it not easier maybe, but more straightforward to go get these to make moves to improve your ceiling in the short and long term.
yeah, and we don't know how available he is. We don't know how much of a credible threat Giannis saying only want to play in New York allegedly is. Do you think they're a player for Giannis?
No, no. Giannis is not going to Detroit. It's just not going to happen.
But they have the assets to do it, and
Do
in
they?
theory, well, you probably can't. You probably would have to give up Duren or Osar, and Duren and Giannis. If you keep Duren, which I think they'd want to, that's not the cleanest fit in the front court, right? I mean, Duren has
I don't
started.
know. I just think the Giannis market is interesting to me because the teams that you would identify as like, forget the teams that he wants, but the teams that you'd identify as like, okay, this team has the assets to go get Giannis. Okay, so let's just list them out. It's OKC, obviously. It's the Spurs. It's Detroit. It's
Atlanta.
Houston. Yeah, Houston. It's Atlanta. Let's just say those are the 5 teams. I think we're reaching
Brooklyn
a point.
seems to believe they have enough picks.
No, we're not doing the fucking pygmy thing over there in Brooklyn. But I think we're reaching a point now in the NBA where teams are, one, there's an appreciation for like simply going and getting a guy, no matter how good the guy is, no matter how good he is, simply gutting your roster and your asset stash to go get a guy, it doesn't achieve anything. You're not winning anything that way. Depth is king in many ways in the NBA nowadays. Like you need to go at least 8 or 9 deep. And in the regular season, you want to have the ability to call on maybe 10, 11, even 12 guys.
And those 8 to 9 guys
night.
have to be viable, at least neutral players, right?
Yeah,
That's another
and we're
big
talking
change.
about and we're talking about at the top end here. We're not talking about like if you just want to make the playoffs or something. We're talking about if you want to contend, if you want to push for a conference finals appearance, championship. Like you have to have that type of quality depth. So I think there's an appreciation for that. The numbers and the cap is so different now than it used to be, where like if you're accelerating kind of salary onto your books effectively, right? Because what you're projecting, right? Let's just say you're matching the salary for Giannis and whatever. We're going to get into specifics. Let's just say Detroit matches the salary that they'd have to send out for Giannis, and send out all their picks, whatever. Okay, but now you're going to pay Duren next year. Now you're probably into the second apron, right? It just changes so much of the calculus of how much is this guy worth, as great as he is. And the other part is this, and we talked about this last week in the Discord pretty extensively, but like these teams are good. Like they are good. Detroit is going to probably win 50 plus games this year. Houston's going to win 50 plus games this year, and they are rightfully considered a contender. You know, Oklahoma City, they're defending fucking champs, right? Like, like they're the defending champs. Atlanta, has looked very sharp since Trae Young's been out. How real is that? You know, that's its own thing, but they have reason to be optimistic, and they hold the pick that's probably going to be at worst top 3 odds, right? With that New Orleans pick they're holding. So this is okay. So we're good, and we have this thing coming. Like these are the teams typically where like how are sorry, what I should say is, and San Antonio is on a 50-win pace, even with Wembanyama missing time, even with Stephon Castle missing time, and Dylan Harper missing time. So they probably feel great about where they are. If you feel great about where you are, and you look at your team and you're like, we can win 50 plus games, and maybe we can make some noise this year. How many times in NBA history have you seen a team that you would describe in such a way make some huge all-in push mid-season that completely changes the kind of dynamics of their roster and is
What
successful?
pace was Nico Harrison on last year? What pace were they on?
They were. I don't know what they were, but they had a lot of injuries at the time. Either way, and that was stupid and that was dumb, right? As we know
It's
now,
the exception that proves the rule. Yeah,
yeah. But it's rare that, or I cannot think of a team that was kind of, let's say they project as a 50-plus win team and think that they can make noise in the playoffs, that they punt on that opportunity mid-season and make some huge seismic change to the roster because of this trade they're going to make. I can't think of it. I mean, the best one, and it's not really accurate because this team definitely wasn't going to win 50-plus games, but it was probably like the Knicks when they traded for Melo. I mean, they were like 28 and 26 when they traded for Melo, but they obviously, we know, like they traded, Gallinari went out, Wilson Chandler went out, Raymond Felton went out, Mozgov went out. Like, as stupid, oh my God, you're really not going to put Mozgov in the deal for Melo? And it's like, yeah, well, like that's not really the point. The point is like we have, they traded basically 3 or 4 starters, and look, you got Melo, so fine, but that is a huge change. And at least for the Knicks in that case, if you were to kind of justify the logic was, okay, this team is fun and they're talented, but they're 28 and 26. Like, it's not exactly a team that we think is going to make waves in the playoffs here. And that's not the case for Detroit. That's not the case for Houston. That's not the case for OKC. That's not the case for San Antonio. I don't know. I don't think it's the case for Atlanta. I think Atlanta
was
can
Jimmy
make some
traded
noise.
to Philly mid-season? Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, they didn't give him much to get him though. It was Saric, it was Covington, and it was Jared Bayless and a pick. So not exactly huge.
King's ransom.
Oh, yeah. But to go even with and the other key part to this is, if you're these teams, right? You could arguably be like, look, we're basically the market here. And to us, like, do you need to go trade for Giannis to improve your chances to contend? Or can you make a smaller move that costs you less in assets and leaves you more flexible to revisit it down the line? Like, hey, you know what? We would love Giannis, but what we would like to do is we would like to see how this team performs over the course of the season and revisit it later at the end in the offseason. And that's ultimately where I think it's going to end up, because it's hard, man. It's hard. If you're a team like Houston who's playing at the level they are, yeah, Giannis is great. Do I want to trade Şengün and Phoenix picks for Giannis? And, it sounds almost ridiculous to say it out loud, because Giannis is, top 3, top 4, top 5 player, whatever. And he's proven it over the course of years. But it's not that crazy if you're thinking about it from like the perspective of a team like Houston.
Yeah, and he's 31, right? And Şengün is still growing. I think
injury risks with Giannis.
My pushback would be, this might be a year where you're less likely to rest on your laurels of 50 wins, particularly an Eastern Conference team, because Boston's been playing well, and if Tatum comes back, that changes things. And to what extent, I don't know. But obviously, they've beaten some good teams. It's not fluky shit. They have a really good coach, and they've won a championship. And you get back an MVP caliber player, or first team All NBA player caliber player, that matters, right? But it's pretty, like, if you think Indiana is not a factor this year, they'll probably be back in some threatening way next year. They have a great coach and a bona fide top player.
They're probably going to get a very high lottery pick.
They're going to get a high lottery pick. Oklahoma City might get the Clippers pick. They might get they will get the Clippers pick, but that could end up being top 3. So this might be the year where you say, look, if we're already this close, this might be our best chance in the next few years. And that's without even, I think this is overblown. But if you think of Wemby as like, it's a matter of time before he's literally just an unsolvable problem if he's not already. He's only going to get better. This might feel like this could be our best shot for the next few years to actually make a run to the title. And, we want to stack the deck as much as possible. I think you froze. But yeah, so I mean, I totally get the idea of, making sure that, for a lot of these teams, especially with young talent that are already good, a team like Detroit has upside, right? Duren is probably going to continue to get better. I don't think I don't think the book is closed on Jaden Ivey yet. He's coming off an injury. Holland, still, there are a lot of people very high on him. And Detroit can bet on their player development. Like I said, even guys like Isaiah Stewart, right? They've basically become everything you would have hoped they were as prospects, and not all of them were top picks. And it's really just Cade and Ivy that were in Holland. But Holland, newer player, but Duren was 13th pick, and there were questions. Osar went 5th or 6th, but wasn't like a slam dunk. Like there were questions, right? It wasn't a slam dunk pick as like a number 1 overall, like Cade was, and even Cade, right? Cade has developed well, so that would be a reason for me. But I do think like where I think it becomes interesting is the next few years may be much more difficult to win a title. If Oklahoma City gets the Clippers pick, if Wemby gets even better, Indiana comes back, Boston has a healthy Tatum for a full season, this might be the year where it's worth it to stack the deck to try to give yourself the best shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the push and pull of it all is, you don't want to, and this is something the Knicks had to deal with, right? Where it was like they kept their picks, they kept their young guys, and yeah, you're good. You get to the second round of the playoffs. Like this is objectively a good trajectory you're on. At what point do you view it though, and you're like, okay, you know what? We like these guys, we like our talent. Obviously, it's great to have our draft picks and everything, but are we being complacent? And ultimately, does the group that we've assembled here, does it have the ceiling of a team that can win a championship? Or is this something that we have to be aggressive and look out into the trade market to upgrade on? And they made the determination that as good as the group they had assembled was, somewhat organically, that they needed to be more aggressive in the marketplace and bring in outside talent to get to that higher level. And again, though, it's worth noting, like, they waited 3 years before they really started getting that aggressive, like 3.5 years, right, before they started cashing in these chips in a major way. If you want to be a little bit more generous, you could say 2.5 years. I guess, does Detroit feel they already know that about their team? I would suspect they don't, right? This is a new front office that took over before the start of last season. They had a great first season. They're on to a very promising start right now. And why should they not believe that these young guys can't develop more and push their ceiling higher without going out and getting a big name move? I mean, they could also, again, like, I just think they can look at it and be like, getting Giannis would be awesome, but would it be more awesome than just replacing Ron Holland, with like wing shooter X, who maybe won't cost us more than a second round pick or two, or you know what I mean? Like, I just think that's something to consider. And especially for them, they're going to consider it because they have the luxury, they have the ability to be patient.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a tough call. I think any star trade these days, because teams are getting a premium, is kind of a tough call, right? Orlando made what I thought was a pretty good trade at the time. Now there's still questions, right? By the way, fuck Desmond Bain. That was some bullshit.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about the Magic. Don't worry.
But he went for four first round picks. Bridges a year before went for 5 first round picks, right? And I think for the Magic, I don't know if there's you. It's too soon to say buyer's remorse, but they still had other holes, right? I think the one that we always talked about, and I think I was a little bit higher on it than you, but there's not a true. You don't ideally want Paolo or even Franz to be your primary creator in a way that's going to win you playoff series. Paolo has performed really well in the playoffs, but that formula doesn't seem to work. And it was more than, and I think, my hypothesis was, the spacing sucks. I think you're seeing so far with Bane, they haven't figured out how to make Bane the solution to that problem. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. With Bridges, the Knicks are trying to solve a very clear problem, which is that, we saw it, right? Like Dante struggled on defense in both series. He had a really good game 6 against Maxey, but against Indiana, he struggled on defense, right? He doesn't have ideal size. So you make the trade. We want another wing to go with OG and really fortify the perimeter defense, but that has cost too, right? And if that's not the final piece, then you're really stuck. So it's always an interesting conversation whenever you consolidate, when you trade for a star.
Yeah,
and I mean,
I think the Bridges thing that you brought up, it's a good example, or not? It's an interesting example because on the surface, and we all said this, is it was an overpay. Like, all of your future draft capital, your future draft trade flexibility out the door for Mikal Bridges, like that seems like a really big overpay. And I still think it was an overpay, but this is where contracts matter so much now in this league, because you were getting 2 years of Bridges on a salary that was whatever 23, 24 million a year before you actually had to before he goes up to a higher level. It affords you more flexibility in how you're able to operate in trades and build out your roster. And ultimately, it was a part of the reason they were able to get Karl-Anthony Towns. So, it's very it's complex, and I don't think these questions are as straightforward as they used to be. For a variety of reasons, the league is more talented. There's more depth. Teams themselves are deeper, but also the entire cap management part of it is just so much more layered and complex now than it's ever been, and that that always will influence, you know, how you ultimately, how you operate in building out your team.
Yeah, that's interesting. But getting back to Detroit at this time, I think the Knicks are head and shoulders should be the favorite in the East. Um, you know, I'm more worried about if Boston really clicks with Tatum there, or Cleveland hitting the ceiling they did last year as the major threats.
Yeah, so I wanted to basically turn the Detroit thing into kind of seeing where you're at in terms of the Knicks competition. I personally think Detroit is the Knicks' best competition because the Cleveland thing is just weird to me. I don't know. It feels like things are stale, and that's a group that needs a shakeup. I don't know what kind of shakeup will be available to them. It is always easier to do that in the offseason than in the than at the trade deadline. Um, but uh, Detroit, again, like for all the reasons we already talked about, they have all their picks. They have young guys that I think will hold value in trade around the league. Um, I like the flexibility that gives them, and they're already good. So um, that makes a big difference. Um, so projecting all that out, I think they're kind of in their own. I think they're the Knicks's. That's the team I'm keeping my eye on the most. Let's put it that way. Uh, Orlando made their big move, right? They made their big move for Desmond Bane. They got good news today. Franz Wagner is only out for 2 to 4 weeks. That looked like a potential, really, really serious injury that could hold him out for a long time. So good for him and good for them. But they made their big move with Desmond Bane. I am intrigued by some pieces they have, but I don't know how much trade value they ultimately will have. I don't know what their appetite is to consolidate more. I'm also a little bit uncertain of who they would even consolidate for. It feels like they probably need a quality lead guard, but I don't know who that lead guard might be. And, you know, it's what are you trading to get that quality lead guard? Because, like I mentioned, they gave up their most of their draft capital. That's out the door. So now you're talking about more player based trades, and how many of those, what is the trade value of their various guys? How much does Anthony Black command? How much does, whatever. So I I will say from a pure like this team to me is they're a bad matchup for the Knicks in a lot of ways, but I don't think they are a true contender, which is kind of an interesting dichotomy. But um, and I guess I'm more skeptical of their ability to get there. Desmond Bain also, yeah, fuck that guy. I don't know what that was about. I couldn't believe Breen and Clyde were just going out of their way to like make it this not a big deal. It was fine. It's a basketball play. Desmond Bain's not this type of player. I'm like, no, I think that was a bullshit play, and I think he's exactly this type of player. That's what I think about Desmond Bain. Um, so yeah, but I don't. I'm not there with them as a contender. I think Atlanta is probably a year away from considering making this type of big move. Although maybe if they are going to move on from Trey Young, that opens up an opportunity for them. I just don't think that he has very serious trade value. So yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely more concerned about Detroit than you, and I'm not as concerned about Cleveland as you are, just because I don't know what to make of them. That's really the main reason. I don't know what to make of them. They obviously have talent. This is mostly the roster that they had last year that won 60 plus games and looked like a juggernaut before they got hurt and got into the playoffs. Um, is that version of the team there? Maybe, but we have to see it. Have to see it, and we haven't so far.
Yeah, I've seen it last year, so like I guess it's also it's still a long season, right? We're a little more than a quarter of the way there, close to a third of the way there. Um, I'm still not, and to your point, I think that there will be more movement across the league, and if Detroit is best positioned to, we'll see. How quickly can they incorporate someone? If they don't go for a big name like Giannis or Markkanen, I think Dylan Brooks and Phoenix is playing well, so we'll see if that's even available. I wonder if Dallas is going to go fire sale mode. Though I think that if you have any reservations about your team trading for Giannis, you would definitely have them about Anthony Davis. Maybe they end up being a third team in a three-way trade that facilitates Giannis because of AD's salary. Um, you know, just wouldn't want to play Miami in a series because it's going to kind of be much more agonizing. um, so I think where I think I agree with you is that with Detroit's flexibility, they have enough where there is a scenario in which they get something that puts them over the top that maybe makes them the favorite in the East. I just don't think, and I think frankly the chatter about it, whether it's Cade and Brunson, whether it's just them being better than the Knicks, I don't think it's the Knicks have the best net rating in the East. They have proven in the playoffs that they can beat this team and they can play at the highest level. They're 2 years removed from Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. They're a year removed from Game 6. They have, I think, in the East, besides Giannis, the number one guy you would want taking a shot at the end of the game. That's why I've also heard people say that about Mitchell versus Brunson, and I've just never understood that. That's not a conversation we need to rehash. So I guess that's where I'm at, where I'm like, I think this team is being overhyped by people who are like, they're uh, they're like right there or better than the Knicks. I think there's still a gap, but I think like if they can make a move, get a guy. Brooks is the guy that keeps coming to mind, but he's having a career year. Even it's interesting. I don't like this fit for them necessarily, but I'm interested to see what Brooklyn does with Michael Porter Jr. Right? That's the example of a guy who would move the needle for them. I don't know if he's a cultural fit, given how together that team seems to be, and some of him being a little bit weird. So yeah, I think their flexibility is probably the scariest part for me. So flexibility with a high floor. So
yeah. The thing with Miami that I think is very interesting is, I think their trade assets are good, and the big thing that's holding them back is they don't have that pick they traded for Rozier is still open, and um, yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Ware has developed really nicely, right? This year he's having a monster year, and that's kind of the type of guy where it's like he's an interesting one for me in terms of like it's I you don't want to write a player off this early in their career, but it's like the odds of him becoming Giannis are right, they're minuscule, like very 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 limited, and not just him. Most players, I want to break some news to you, Stacy. Most players will not be as good as Giannis. That's actually how that works. So it's like, is he worth it? Like, and like you mentioned, the East is open. It feels like an open year. If you're Miami and you're like, okay, I don't know that this is possible. But if we can get Giannis for picks and Khalil Ware and salary filler, is that good enough? Like, it's probably worth it for you to find out. Might be worth it for you to find out, especially if you view Miami as one of the unique markets in the league where it's like guys want to go play there, so they still have pull and kind of free agency like that. It's interesting. I don't know that they have the juice to get Giannis because they don't have picks from other teams that you project as being of super value. And obviously their own picks become diminished if they trade that out for Giannis. So that's always that's an interesting conversation. But I do think Ware is a very interesting piece. Um, if they were to look to get aggressive in the trade market. But as constructed, like, no, I don't think that they're going to win a championship. And that's fine. Like they're much better off now than they were where what it looked like they were 6 months ago.
yeah, where helps. Rozier, what has there been an update on that with Rozier's legal proceedings or
No,
whatever?
no.
Um, you know, they're an interesting team. I'm very curious to see how they think of Bam. Right? Do they feel like he's the kind of centerpiece for the team? Is there a future with him and Ware, and do they complement each other enough? But it's still Miami, right? They're going to play good defense. They're going to they're going to be competitive from a tactical standpoint in every series because of Eric Spoelstra. Um, they're kind of riding that play-in vibe right now. Vibe. They're right in that mix. They're 6th seed right now, tied with the Magic.
Yeah.
I think there's a little less upside just because they just don't have a ton of creation besides Bam. I've just never been the biggest fan of Tyler Hero or that scared of him.
I have a feeling you're not alone in not being the biggest fan of Tyler Hero.
No, I don't have anything personally against them. I don't buy him as someone I'm really going to fear in a playoff series. Which I would say for really most of these teams, besides probably the Celtics. So yeah, I think Ware is a good development. The Heat are in a better position. Don't think they're title threat. One of the more surprising teams is our old friends in Toronto. They're 15-10. Maybe they'll come back to earth a little bit. The Knicks got a nice win over them. What's your read on this team?
On Toronto?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just think it was interesting, like, Ingram was getting all this credit for their really nice start to the year when they were winning and everything. And it's kind of funny, though, if you look at the actual, like, the on-offs and stuff like that, he's been pretty bad all year, and in some ways, while I think RJ has genuinely taken a leap this year, like, I think it's not just surface level bullshit, like, he's actually vital important for them. Maybe is a better word. Maybe not vital, but important for them.
We've said this. He's gotten off to hot starts before in his career. You know too well.
This feels a little bit different to me. It's not just a bunch of hot 3-point shooting. He's actually making good decisions off drives, and I think his dribble penetration is extremely valuable for them specifically because they don't have dynamic driving threats really. Otherwise, Ingram's not a dynamic driving threat. Quickly can drive, but he's not really like, it's not like he's collapsing defenses constantly. Barnes is more of like a rough and tumble guy. Like I think he can create, but he's not really like a dynamic driver.
Well, that's what we used to say about RJ, right? Is that he's more of a physical bully ball guy than
and I wouldn't say RJ. Yeah, RJ's not the most dynamic driver, but I do think what we also used to say is, man, if RJ would just figure out to like turn some of these stupid fucking shots he tries into these obvious passes that are open to him in the corners or above the break or whatever, it would just change so much for him. And I wouldn't say that he's reached some all-star level or that he's perfectly making all those decisions, but he's doing a much better. The balance of those decisions is much better. So with him out, I think they're experiencing some drop off with that. I still think the Ingram acquisition was bad, but they've done some good things. Their bench is nice, man. I like Mamu Kalashvili is a nice player. Agbaji has looked pretty decent at times. Shed, not much of a shooter, hell of a defender, point of attack. They just throw bodies at you. I think Grady Dick moving him to the bench has been good for him, at least as far as impact, maybe not so much in terms of minutes.
his on off is pretty nuts. He's there with Dick on 10.96. How did I not bring up Grady Dick when you were talking about their lack of dribble penetration? 10.96 with him on negative 1.9. This is PBP stats, so Clean and Glass might have better, but it's pretty impressive. And I mean, to your point, it probably does have to do with moving to the bench a little bit and that helping both lineups maybe.
Yeah. So I just think that they're fine, but ultimately they're probably going to end up where I thought they would end up, which was like, I thought they were, I think I took their over. I thought they'd win like 42, 43 type 42, 43 wins. Maybe they finish slightly above that, but I don't, they're not, they're another team where it's like, could they make a move at some point here to go get somebody? I don't think they have anything to get Giannis, but, they definitely need more, but they're okay. I think they're playing at least more competitive basketball than they have for the last few years. And yeah, it's fine, I think, for them to maybe take some time and see what this group is capable of before they make another big swing, because they've been kind of taking some real chances, I guess you could say, with how they've operated the last few years. But this group at least seems to be good enough that they don't need to be desperate to do something right now to change their fortunes or anything.
And then one team I think you'd have to consider a bit of a wild card is Philly. So they're 13-10. They're in the hunt. They've racked up some good wins. That's despite not getting much from Joel Embiid. He's only played 9 games. He is at a career low in basically across the board, averaging just 18 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3 assists, and then his true shooting is just he's shooting 21% from 3, so you'd expect that to go up. But his 2-point percentage is not where you'd expect it, right? It's a guy who was mid-50s to upper 50s in his prime. He's below 50 for the second straight season. Obviously, he didn't play much last year. But if he was to kind of get back into any kind of form, they have started to look a lot better around him. And, we've seen their ceiling, right? I mean, their ceiling might be second round, haha, but that they have the talent when it's all fully loaded to be a threat. But, do you kind of see, this kind of being Embiid is just washed at this point? The injuries are just too debilitating. Because I think the rest of their team, they've done some interesting things. I don't know what's going to happen with Grimes, but that's been a good acquisition for them. Maxey has continued to play like a star. I think Paul George has been healthier this year. Is this still just kind of doesn't really matter.
Doesn't really matter. You have too much. Even if Paul George is better, like he's not living up to his contract. Joel Embiid is not living up to his contract. That's about $100 million in annual salary each year. Like, I just don't know if there's much precedence for having that much kind of dead salary on your books or substandard salary on your books and it working out. Like that you can overcome that and be a contender.
I
I think
mean,
they're
I know you're an
okay.
Embiid hater. Like, what if Embiid did return to form, or do you just not see that happening?
I'm not entertaining Fantasyland hypotheticals here. Like the guy has not looked like I don't know if you watched them last night. He was 4 of 21 last night. I thought he looked fucking and he couldn't even move. But yeah, I mean, they're like the fact getting Edgecombe is a huge deal, right? That's a huge deal. Obviously, him and Maxi give you some kind of like they give you two pieces that you could feel good about. And two pieces that you can feel good about, not just in terms of what they can do, but how you can build with and around them long term. So I think that's a really big deal. And you know, they're not a contender to me for at least a little while here. But they have time. Edgecombe gives you some time, and maybe you can figure out what to do with Embiid and Paul George's contracts in the next year, 2 years, or something. But yeah, I mean, I think in terms of teams that I genuinely feel have some avenue or pathway to being a contender in the East, I think it's obviously the Knicks to us anyway. It's the Knicks, it's Detroit. I'm a little bit skeptical of Orlando, but maybe them. Same with Cleveland, who, like you mentioned, I think something is off there. I'm not sure. I mean, definitely something is off there given the way they're playing, right? But I don't know what it is, and I don't know what exactly they could use if they're looking to make a move. But you know, the Knicks are in a good spot, man. That's all I can really say. They're in a really good spot, I think, um, in terms of do they have the ability to I guess where I'm at with the Knicks is like I think they have some small potato stuff, and I don't mean that in the sense of this is unimportant things. Small potatoes in terms of like I think they need some very specific kind of marginal things. Another an extra kind of point of attack defender. I think that would help. Another ball handler would help. Another big wing would help. Um, how many of those can they address? I don't know. But those are the kind of things that I think they need. Whereas a team like Detroit, I think they need one more offensive creator, right? I think that's harder to find, right? Especially a good one that can hold up in the playoffs. I think Orlando needs a lead guard. That's a lot harder to find. I think Cleveland, I don't even know what where the hell to go with this. You know, they need a point of attack defender. They could probably use more on the wing. They need to get healthy. Like all of this sounds like a lot going on here. They need to figure out what the hell they're doing with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. Is that a dynamic they want to persist with moving forward? Like they're just there's a lot with them. Atlanta, I think, is set up nicely to kind of open up a window to contend, but they still have some big ticket items to kind of figure out and clear up their future. Plus, they have that Pelicans pick, so we have to see how that works out. But yeah, I think Detroit and Orlando are the two teams that I think have I'm most kind of keeping my eye out on them. Most keeping my eye on them. And again, like with Orlando, especially because Franz, he looked bad yesterday. It looked like he might be out for the year. It looked like, maybe an ACL, but him coming back this year kind of makes them still a very viable potential threat in the conference, I think.
I I guess like I just expect Cleveland to figure it out. I saw how good they looked last year. They still have a lot of talent. I think that is up there with the Knicks is the most talented roster. And I just worry about the Magic spacing in the playoffs. Like I said, I think these teams that are like just great defensive teams that are a pain in the ass to play, you're not going to enjoy that series, but winning 3 series, I think that's asking a lot from those teams. Detroit has a higher ceiling because Cade is better than any of the creators that the Magic have. But I guess I'm higher on Cleveland than you. I think they have too much talent, and I think highly of Atkinson at this point. And I saw what they did last year. I mean, from 68 wins to like, I think there's much more to them than this.
Yeah, I mean, you could be right. Certainly wouldn't be that crazy for that to be the case. Yeah, we'll see. We'll have to see. All right. I think that's a good place to end this. Stacy, let the people know where they can find you and plug anything you'd like to plug.
Find me at Stacy Patton 89. I'll plug all the great work at the Strickland. In particular, obviously basketball season is in full swing, but as the playoffs come in, as the NFL playoffs approach, and a lot of interesting races, definitely follow Strictly NFL and Constantine, and yeah, all the great work we're putting out.
Awesome. I will echo all those sentiments. Check it all out at the Strickland. We have a lot of content, so keep your eyes peeled. All right, that is our show for today. Hope everybody has a great week. Hope the Knicks have a great week, and I will see you on Friday. Peace.